r/rules horror. Posted by u/fluffyboy2. There is a specific rule everyone in my school must follow. Never stay at school when the flowers in the garden bloom. I study at a high school in the countryside. It's a relatively small and peaceful place, although from what I've heard, it has a quite morbid history. It takes 7 to 8 minutes to get from my home to school, so I usually walk there. One thing about the school I'm studying at is that, it isn't as strict as schools in the city. Schools in the city usually have rules like no running in the hall, no phones, and anything you could think of. But the school here, there is only one main rule that everyone must follow. At least that's what the principal said when it was the opening ceremony. The rule is, never stay at school when the flowers in the garden bloom. The principal also added that the flowers bloom at 8 p.m. At that moment, I thought to myself, the garden was placed at a side of the school, and when I first got inside, I did notice the garden. It was a garden full of red spider lily. From what I've learned, they only bloom for a few weeks in September or October, right? So how could they bloom at 8 p.m. in February? That was the strange point. This will be the only rule in the school. Your homeroom teachers will explain it in more detail when you all got to class. After that, the principal guided us up to our classes. The classroom isn't big, it could fit about 20 students per class. It is weird when it's supposed to be a high school, but when I think about it, it's a small countryside and there aren't many teenagers here. The school being small is not a weird thing. I was placed in the middle of the class. While everyone in the class knew each other, I was the only one that doesn't know anyone. The door then got opened, sending the whole class into silence. Our teacher, a middle-aged man, walked into the class and stood on the platform. It was my last year of high school, and since I just moved to the countryside, I didn't know why everyone was so serious when the teacher walked in. Back in the city, the teachers were barely noticed when they walked into the class. Maybe it was because the class is small so the teacher could easily be seen. He then pulled out a file from his folder. This year, we have a new student in our class. Would you mind to introduce yourself, please? Miller. It's Miller, sir. I said. Ah yes, you don't need to make it a long one, we still have a lot of things to talk about today. I introduced myself thoroughly and sat down. Everyone seems friendly. Okay, now that is out of the way, we'll talk about it. The air suddenly felt heavy, I could feel it weighing on my body. 30. That was the time it was lowered. It was 8:30 p.m. last year. Now, it is 8 p.m. The whole class was silent. I was more than confused. Ah, you, Miller, yes. There are sub-rules to that one main rule. But you won't need to remember these if you don't break the main rule itself. After the long list of rules the teacher said, both pages on my notebook was filled with words. I'll list the rules here. 1. If the flower bloom and you're still in the school, try and hide your existence as long as possible. 2. If you see any students during that time, don't try and talk to them. 3. If you see a girl in an old school uniform which is white and black, avoid her at all cost. 4. If you heard someone calling for your name or tapping on your shoulder, don't turn back or walk to the sound. 5. If you see a student with a phone, look at that student at all times. 6. If you see a student that is not looking at you, don't interact with them. 7. You must not get outside of school or open the gate at that time. 8. When the flowers aren't blooming anymore, which is 5 a.m., leave the school if you have the key. I have to say, reading those rules feels off, like, usually I'd have something inside me tell me that. PSSH, these are all obviously fake. But then this time, I felt aware. Was it because the air in the class was making me feel that way? Or was it my body telling me that it's something I need to believe in? Alright, that's enough for today. Now head home and stay safe. Make sure to have everything in your backpack. We started to head home after 5 hours of talking or so. It was the first day of a new school year anyway, so of course there wouldn't be any studying. I should have checked my backpack. When I got home, I was welcomed by a table full of food. Were we having a party? Welcome home, hun. My mom said. What are all these food? Are we having a party? No. Your mom is just cooking some food to celebrate your first day at school. My dad answered my question. So, how was school? Was it great? Asked my mom. It was unusual. I can't explain how. It was normal but just a little bit unusual. The rules, the unusual things the teacher and the principal said, everything keeps lingering around my mind. Anyway, let's get on the table, I'm already hungry. I moved on to another conversation to avoid questions. After finishing lunch, I head up to my room, took a shower and then passed out on my bed because the previous day when I got to this place, it was nighttime and I was not familiar with it, so I was left sleepless. After a long time has passed, I woke up with a slight headache. The countryside really wasn't for me. It was 5 p.m, the outside was already dark. Not pitch black, but blue dark. I decided to take a walk outside to take some fresh air. At that point, I had already forgotten about the rules. When 2 hours or so passed, I went back to my house to eat dinner, but then I remembered something. Miller, remember to fill this form. We need to know your information to put them in the school's system. The teacher handed me a paper form but I forgot to fill it. I came back home to find my mom already preparing the food. Where are you going? It's dinner. My mom asked. I need to take something. I immediately ran upstairs to my room. I opened my backpack and didn't find the form. Shit, I left it on my desk at school. If I don't do it now, I might forget it. I put on my clothes and grabbed a flashlight. I also brought my phone in case if my flashlight died out. I ran downstairs and told my parents I'll be back as soon as possible without giving them the details that I was heading to the school. After a few minutes of running, I was finally there. I was standing in front of the school. The main gates were locked but the wooden door next to it wasn't. Probably because the security guard was doing one last sweep to make sure that everyone is out. I should make it back in time, it will be just a quick in and out. Without a second thought, I entered the school. The door swung open, making a creaking sound. Like I said before, it wasn't a big school. It has 2 floors but it's decently wide. In front of me was the main building and there are 2 paths on both sides which will lead to the stairs. In the middle was the door which leads into the cafeteria where there is also a big platform for the principal to make announcements on it. The sky started to get darker and the school was pitch black already. I could hear footsteps coming from upstairs. It was probably the security guard. I went up the stairs on the left side. As I walked up the creaky stairs, a light shined from the corner onto the wall. I didn't want to get into trouble so I stayed low and slowly walked over to the other side. I went up the first floor and since I didn't want to gain any attention with the security guard still walking around, I used the light on my screen instead, although it doesn't reach that far. I walked around, looking at the label on each door to find my class. I don't even remember where it is, I just know it is room 14. It was a tough time. I had to move around in the dark while there was a security guard also around. When I finished searching through the first floor, I wasn't able to find my room. I went up the second floor and when I got to the very last part of the pitch black hallway, I found my classroom. Room 14. I put my hand on the knob and turned it, but the door was locked. I tried to think of where the key might be and that's when I remember something. As usual, all the teachers will be leaving the key to the classroom in the teacher's lounge. If any of you need to access the room when there is no one around and the room is locked, use them. Though remember, don't stay at school when the flowers bloom. My homeroom teacher did mention the place for the keys to each classroom. The teacher's lounge was also on the second floor, a few rooms away from room 14. I recalled walking past it earlier. When I got to the teacher's lounge, I opened the door and wandered around looking for my teacher's desk. He teaches biology, so his desk must be. I walked over to a desk with the biology book on it. Although there are 2 desks with biology books on both, I got it first try. There was a small key on the desk with the tag room 14 on it, so I grabbed the thing and as I was about to walk away, I saw a small note. Dear teachers, from now on, never cut the flowers in the garden. There was also a weird book next to the note. On the cover was the word biology. 12th grade. Before I moved to the countryside, I did go to the bookstore and unlike the biology book I saw, the biology book on the desk was old and the paper that was used to make it seems a bit downgrade. It looks like a book made exclusively for the countryside only. Curious, I opened it to the first lesson. The red spider lily flower. The red spider lily flower, also known as Lycoris radiata, is a plant in the Amaryllis family. The first few lines were normal biology but this type of flower bloom at midnight. But the word midnight was crossed out with a pencil. Then next to it was 11:30 p.m. which was also crossed out. Every other times written in there were also crossed out beside the 8 p.m. I was creeped out, but I was hesitant to close the book. I started reading more. When the flower bloom, it is a sign that the door for the dead to walk into our world has been opened. The more flowers there are, the more people from the other side are now in our world. I suddenly remembered the rule. Never stay at school when the flowers in the garden bloom. The flowers bloom at 8 p.m. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. It was 7:56 p.m. I hurried out of the room and unlocked the door which led into my classroom. I was shocked to see that all of the backpacks were all on the chairs. No one brought their backpack home. I didn't have time to think, so I quickly grabbed the form on my table and head out. As soon as I headed out, I could see the guard locking the wooden door through the window. I slammed on the window to call for him and he noticed me. He was shocked, but then he took a look at his phone. He then shook his head and walked away. I ran over to the stairs, and next to the stair was another window which shows the right side of the school where the garden is. As I pulled out my phone and look at it, the time switches from 7:59 p.m. to 8 p.m. The red spider lily flowers in the garden started to bloom, creating a mystic red color that covered the whole garden. The flowers has covered a wide big garden which could fill too many flowers to count.